to the April 2021 Fireside of the Berkeley Hillside Club. I am here completely by myself in the club right now, but it might be the last time that that is the case. So fingers crossed that we will be opening up to some degree and that some of you will be able to join, probably not next month when we do our dinner, the magical dinner, but in June. So we'll work on that. So and look forward to it. For those of you who are not Hillside Club members, let me just very briefly say that this Fireside series is a long-standing tradition of our club, going back over a century. This club was founded by women who were very interested in shaping the development of North Berkeley, where we are, and they were successful in influencing the way that our streets follow the natural contours of the land and preserve trees and all of the rocky outcroppings that were naturally here. So we have in this beautiful building a fireside that we like to celebrate every month. And we have a tradition that we like to follow and maintain of early activism, if you will. And this evening's program is very much in keeping with that. So I chose this topic this month because April has Earth Day, and my philosophy, which is every day should be Earth Day. But certainly April is Earth Month, and so it is a real treat to bring upon our speaker for this evening. It was a pleasure to discover that Steve Orm is doing the work that he's doing to try to improve the cleanliness and undo the trash that has especially accumulated during the pandemic. So many things about the earth have improved since the pandemic started. The air quality certainly has. Greenhouse gases have been reduced. But what's been increased is trash. And he's going to tell you about that and why. Stephen has become something of a trashologist, really learning a lot about why people trash and what we can do about it. Was my pleasure to teach Scottish country dancing to his parents many years ago. Stephen is a Berkeley native, went to high school with one of our members, Liza O'Malley. And so it's a real treat to welcome him virtually to our fireside and to tell you about Untrash the East Bay and Untrash the Planet. Welcome, Steve Orm.
Fantastic. So thank you for that, Arlene. So my group is called, well, initially Untrash East Bay, and we're morphing into something a little bit more ambitious called Untrash the Planet. So you may hear me mix those back and forth. So let's jump right in. We got started in January of last year and basically trying to fix a problem up at Grizzly Peak. And so what you see on this screen here is a few of those work parties and a few of the people who were engaged in that work. Super beautiful up there. And I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about our experiences. So how it started, we got started in January 2020, and our first project was untrashing 3.5 miles of Grizzly Peak, all the way from Centennial to Marlborough Terrace. And the photograph that you see here on the right is a little bit of that terrain. It's quite difficult. These are hangout spots, and people would toss things off the edge. And eventually we figured out how to use ropes, and we went down those canyons. We got a lot of that out. There's still a great deal of trash up there down these canyons, but we've taken out quite a bit. Over 40 work parties in 8 months, we removed 450 bags of trash from Grizzly Peak. So that's how we began, and how it's going is we're now up to about 600 members. We organize weekly work parties across half a dozen projects. Lake Merritt, Aquatic Park, Strawberry Canyon, University Encampment are all examples. Our main project right now is Lake Merritt. To date, we've organized 6 work parties and we've removed almost 2,000 bags of trash just from the canal area of Lake Merritt. And you'll see one of our trash piles here in a minute, and you can get a sense of what 2,000 bags of trash means. Altogether, across all of our projects, we've removed a little over 6,000 bags of trash to date. And our current project, in addition to the weekly Untrash work parties, is a new platform to help anybody, anywhere launch an Untrash group. And I'll show you a little bit about it. So this is some footage from Laney College. This is from the canal area. And this is the pile that we accumulated after one day. And I'm just gonna let this run. Get a little bit of a view on the distance here. And you can see in the background, whoops, I guess I can't pause that by hitting spacebar. In the background, you could see the burnt out area in the background. So underneath that bridge was a campsite and a fire had been there. And so all of that trash you see there came out on one work party. That was about 150 cubic yards of trash all told. And that's from the Lake Merritt Canal area. Whoops. So in the course of doing all these cleanups, we've learned quite a bit about trash. And I thought what I would do is this first part is just sort of share some of the background of what the nature of the problem is. So there are 3 main sources of terrestrial trash. They're litter, which is mostly to-go food and smoke packaging. And it's found primarily in parking areas and along roads. And the to-go is important here. This is, it's candy wrappers, it's bottles, it's, to-go packaging, it's potato chip wrappers, things like that. But it's not like milk containers or eggs or other kinds of plastic that you might get at a grocery store. It's specifically to-go food. And that's important when you think about the solutions down the way and regulations and so on. The second main type of trash is dumping. And dumping comes from people moving out, construction waste, and grow operations. And it's found primarily on remote roads and back streets. So, in the Berkeley area, we find it on Wildcat Road, all of the, Redwood Road, all of the sort of the back country roads along Orinda and so forth. And then you find it down, in the West Berkeley kind of area, the quieter streets along the railroad, out at the waterfront and so on. And then the third main source of terrestrial trash are campsites. And campsite trash is what you'd expect. It's tents and bedding and clothes and household waste. And then there are a couple of smaller categories. These include car crashes and sports related. So sports related would be things like golf balls or tennis balls and things that you find around sports activities. Marine trash is a little different. In addition, well, not in addition, marine trash, the number one by far is fishing equipment. We don't really get into marine trash very much. These in turn, a little bit more about litter. So litter is found primarily along roads and parking lots. And so basically any road in the country, if you stop your car in the middle of that road and you walk off to the sides, you will find cans and bottles. And what you will find if it's on a slope is that you'll find whole plastic at the top of that slope, and it'll get more and more aged and degraded, and eventually it will disappear about 50 or 100 feet off the side of the road. And what's happening is that you're seeing 1 or 2 year old plastic at the top of that hill, and then after 5 or so years, it degrades and disappears because it turns into microplastic at that point. The main types of litter, as I mentioned, are to-go food containers, and also smoking related. So cigarette butts, of course. We see quite a lot of They're like a form of cigar, little cigarillos with individual wrappers. We see some wrappers and things like that. The key drivers of litter is social norms. And I'm going to come back to the social norms thing over and over. And then another key driver of littering is availability of trash cans. And again, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit here. So second main form is dumping. So dumping is found primarily on back roads and back streets. So you see here, this is actually a dumping spot off of Wildcat Road from Inspiration Point down to San Pablo Road. We've been doing some cleaning in there, and this is one of those examples. So the sources of dumping are people moving out is the primary, one of the primary categories of this. And you can see that here in a little bit of this. So you can see that machine that's down there in that picture, that's an exercise machine, right? And so somebody moved out of their house or apartment and just needed to get rid of it, and down it went. Construction and landscape waste is another major category of this. And then finally, in our area, we have quite a lot of dumping from marijuana grow operations. And you wouldn't find that in other kinds of areas. I suspect there's other forms of dumping in other parts of the country, but these are the main categories that we see. The key drivers of dumping is high dumping fees. So it is very expensive to go to the dump. And not only that, it takes up a lot of time and a lot of hassle. And if you want to see what this looks like, go down to Gilman Street in Berkeley on any afternoon, and you'll see a line around the block of cars idling, trucks idling, waiting to get into the dump. It takes an hour or two sometimes to get into that dump and the transfer station rather. And when you get there, they're going to charge you at minimum $40, and it goes up from there. So it's expensive, and it takes a lot of time to do it. And then finally, there are very few consequences for backroads dumping. It's very hard to catch. A road like Wildcat Canyon is very quiet. There's nobody along it for long periods of time. You could easily, go out there on a quiet part of the night and not see anybody. And even if you do get caught, the fines are not that high, and averaged out over 3 or 4 dumping runs, you probably would save money. So that is if the police want to prosecute it at all. We occasionally find things like letters and so on in a bag, but it's a hard crime to prosecute, and DAs don't like to touch it because the person can simply claim it was somebody else's who dumped it for them, and so on. So it's hard to prove to a degree that would get a conviction, so DAs tend to avoid prosecuting it. So that's dumping. And then the third major form of trash is from campsites. And we see a lot of this down at University, Ashby, all along basically where the freeways are. There's also a tremendous amount in Strawberry Canyon. So this is a campsite from Strawberry Canyon, and we removed over 25 campsites, abandoned campsites like this, from the canyon and Dwight Canyon. So it's quite a bit out there. So campsite trash is tents and bedding and clothing and household waste. And then also hoarded materials and parts. So you'll often see this, there'll be this enormous pile of bicycles or a big pile of wood or stakes of some sort. And what's happening there is that, when you don't have very much, hoarding things can be a survival strategy. And so people hang on to every little bit that comes. And so you'll see these enormous collections over time. The key drivers, of course, is the number of campers. And we've seen a huge increase in the number of people camping out, which has driven it. The availability of waste removal. Most campsites have no regular waste removal. And finally, the regular clearing of campsites. So campsites used to be kept somewhat in check because they would close them down and just take everything away. And that removes the the accumulation that occurs over time. Okay, so why so much trash these days? We've all noticed it. I was born and raised in Berkeley, and many of you have been here for many years, I suspect. And we've seen how it's grown. So the first answer is that there's more trash. Caltrans was spending 65 million a year on trash abatement, and now they're over 100 million a year. And that happened over just a couple of years. There's less trash removal. Caltrans stopped all litter abatement in early 2020 due to COVID shutdown rules, and they were offline for 2.5 months. And then, in addition, prisoner reform is, I'm sorry, not reform. The prison work parties are still shut down, so they're working with less resources. Campsites are not being removed. So per CDC rules, most campsites have been left in place. The exception of this is when there's a fire, when there's a hazard like that, Caltrans will come in and shut them down. Now this is all COVID related, and so this is about to change. And then jurisdictional lockout has a major role in this. Municipalities don't go on to other people's land, and that includes all of the Caltrans land. It includes any private lands. It includes railways. And so there can be this gigantic mess on University, and the city just, they won't send crews in to deal with it because it's not their land. So how much is there? A little hard to quantify this, but there's some unscientific descriptions of it. First, there's far more trash in the environment than people think. For example, in Wildcat Canyon, so if you go from Inspiration Point down to San Pablo, and you stop at any of the pullouts along there that have a slope, down the downside, every single one of them has dumping off the edge without exception. And that's true of pretty much any rural road next to a city. All pullouts have some level of dumping. That dumping is out of sight, out of mind. And so it's being left there where it accumulates over time. There's some good news in that, that a lot of that trash is old. And what it means that it's old is that legacy trash is not being removed, which means that the flow of new trash in is less than one might think. Oops, I just screwed myself up there. Okay, well, moving on. So why do people trash? First and foremost is social norms, and I'm going to get into this in a little bit, so I'm going to just leave it at that for now. And then there are structural drivers. So when there are no trash cans, people litter more. When there is no regular waste removal, people create middens on site. Think about what would happen if waste disposal went away in your city for 6 months, right? Pretty much everybody would have a midden somewhere on site of their property. And that's what's happening in the encampments right now. And then dumping is driven by high fees and the hassle. So social norms drive trashing. So this is Don't Mess with Texas. This is a famous anti-litter campaign that led to very large reductions in littering in Texas. There is a large body of research that shows that littering is driven by social norms. So one of those findings from the research is that trash begets trash. So if you clean an area, you significantly decrease follow-on trashing. They've done a whole bunch of interesting experiments. They'll set up a parking lot with a bunch of cameras, and they'll put a bunch of litter in that parking lot, and then they'll watch what people do. And then they will clean that parking lot so it's immaculate, and then again, they'll watch what people do. And then they'll do other kinds of interventions where they'll have somebody walk through the parking lot and pick up a piece of trash in front of other people and see what impact that has. And what it does is that it dramatically reduces the amount of littering that happens. So whether or not people litter is very much driven by social norms. And this is a result that has been shown over and over and over in lots of different contexts. There's good news in that it means that this is a malleable thing. Social cues matter, early education matters, social campaigns matter. The other piece of social norms that just needs to be said is that it's very much a class-related thing, where you find far more littering in poorer neighborhoods than you do in middle class or wealthier neighborhoods. And you find far more littering around businesses that cater to poorer people, check cashing places or convenience stores or laundromats than you do in other places. So there's very much a class part of this. And that speaks to how we should think about targeting efforts. So for example, I think it's very important that anti-litter campaigns and anti-litter efforts be targeted at poorer neighborhoods, right? Because again, when you grow up around trash, it's just what you do. So this is it's coming up in the wrong order here. So some other examples on this, we were able to change a culture of trashing along Grizzly Peak, driving a 90% reduction in new trashing over an 8-month period. And how we did that was highly visible, persistent cleanups during periods of peak use. So this was Sunday afternoon, 3:30 to 6:30 kind of a time frame. And we're out there when the people using these places are out there, and we're chatting people up. And everybody is thanking us, and it shifts the whole culture. And then we put up these signs that you see here. You deserve clean, beautiful parks. And again, these are intended to connect with the people who are up there using these spaces, some of whom are doing the trashing. And we tried different things and thought about this hard. My sense is that negative messaging, do not litter, $1,000 fine kinds of stuff, is not as effective as these kinds of this kind of messaging. I need to show that a little bit more systematically and rigorously by doing a formal study of it. But this is our approach right now, are these kinds of very positive signs. And again, we're trying to solve trashing at its roots. So our goal isn't to get people to stop littering up at Grizzly Peak, it's to get people to stop littering, period. Right? And so we want to have a message that people can take away with them. So you deserve clean, beautiful parks is how we do that. There are also structural drivers of trash. So lack of convenient and attractive trash cans. So research shows that more trash cans lead to less littering. Walt Disney, studying this in his parks, decided that in Disney parks, that there needed to be a trash can every 30 feet, right? And the closer and more convenient you put a trash can, the more often it gets used. And then another interesting result is that clean, attractive cans reduce littering, right? And so cleaning the trash can actually helps it see more use. Some other structural drivers. Illegal dumping is cheap, easy, and nearly risk-free. So this is dumping off of Wildcat Canyon. So there's two halves to this. One is that legal dumping is expensive and inconvenient. So high dumping fees are driving an epidemic of backroads dumping. And legal dumping is a hassle. So there aren't that many places you can do it. In our area, it's Richmond, Berkeley has a transfer station, Oakland has a transfer station, but there's like one. And sometimes it involves waiting a long line. It always involves paying a big bill. So those are all reasons why it's hard to do it the right thing. Meanwhile, it's really easy to do the wrong thing. You're very unlikely to be caught. And if you are caught, the consequences are not that dramatic. So we've set up a perfect storm for massive amounts of dumping, and that's what we're getting. Some other structural drivers are jurisdictional lockout and absentee landlordism. So I mentioned this before. Highways, parklands, railroads, and private property are never cleaned by municipal trash abatement services. They don't go on to other people's lands. Our success as a group is that we kind of don't care and we follow the trash, right? So we went on to Caltrans land to clean the university encampment. We do that, pretty much everywhere we go. Absentee landlordism means that landlords are often unaware or they just don't care about the problem. So for example, in Berkeley, the KBLX tower, which is down near Aquatic Park, one edge of it, it has large amounts of trash along that property. And I've called a dozen or more times to try to reach them to discuss cleaning it and have been unsuccessful in doing so. Similarly, the railroads that come through, they're also hard to reach. And when you do reach them, they're not very responsive. So there's an absentee landlordism issue that happens combined with the jurisdictional problem. That means that trash will just sit. Some other structural drivers in insufficient waste removal. So homeless encampments generally have no regular waste removal at all. And so it accumulates, right? Yeah, it's just that. And then there's not enough deep cleaning. So, the lands along, East Bay Parks, for example, lands all have trash along them, but it's down a hill and not that many people are aware of it. And so it's just not much of a priority. And so you find along Wildcat, for example, dumping at every single pullover. And that's going into the EB Mud watershed. And they care a little bit about it, but not enough to go in and clean all of those things out. Compounding this is the high cost of trash removal. So all landowning agencies have a trash removal function. Every municipality, every county, every park, every highway agency, every railroad, all of them. But that trash removal function is often very expensive. So for example, for Caltrans, it costs them $42 a bag to collect and dispose of a bag of trash. And now they have a large budget, so they can get a lot of trash for that. But nevertheless, that's about 3 times what we think we can do it with, and a little bit more about that later. Other agencies like Parks Department will often use their professional staff for this. So rangers are doing the pickup. And again, this is a very expensive way to solve this problem. All right, so that's a little bit about the background of it. I want to talk a little bit about solutions. First of all, how do we set social norms? And hang on a second, I want to remove, I can't do that, okay. So early education matters. Programs that target kids in schools are important. Anti-litter campaigns work. Modeling works. Cleaning with your kids kind of a thing. What we were doing up on Grizzly Peak, where we would show up with our bright yellow vests and Sunday afternoon, where we were very visibly cleaning an area. And not only were we cleaning the area, we left behind signs saying, "You deserve clean, beautiful parks." And so that kind of modeling connects with people in a really strong way and is effective. And again, to set social norms, you have to get people where they live. And so I think that clean streets should be prioritized in poor neighborhoods in particular, right? You grow up around trash, it's just what you do. Some other things that would make a big policy difference is banning fossil plastics, and banning fossil plastics in particular for to-go packaging, right? So it doesn't have to be all packaging, it's the stuff that ends up. So Coca-Cola is switching to biodegradable bottles in 2023. And so there's some good news on this. There are also solutions for things like corn chip packaging, the chips packaging, and so on. But in really to hit everything, this needs to be mandated. So a strong mandate from the state or from the national level that requires plastics that are likely to end up into the environment to be biodegradable would make a huge difference in terms of the long-term impacts of these. Second thing that we can do is that we can make dumping cheap and easy by reducing dumping fees. So part of the reason that dumping fees are high is that there is a theory that if you raise dumping fees, it will drive more recycling. That's maybe true, but it's also driving backroads dumping, and the backroads dumping is frankly more important. Reducing dumping fees and pay for dumping via general funds or property taxes or just some other means, I think is very important. Making dumping for small amounts near free. The thing I would like to see is that truckload sized dumping, it should be cheap and easy. And the larger truckloads, a 5-yard or 10-yard, that's more for industrial use. Those folks pay full ride, and all the little guys get it for free. And that would eliminate, most of the small dumping that you see. Streamlined legal dumping. So it's not only expensive, it's also inconvenient. And again, some of this is related to collecting money for it. So it's expensive, for example, to dump things, time consuming to dump things at the Berkeley transfer station because they weigh you. If you got rid of the weighing requirement, you would increase the throughput and you could make that function streamlined. Large item pickup programs are a great idea. This is another way of making dumping cheap and easy and flexible. And then open dumpster policies that divert illegal dumping. People are down on open dumpsters because a mess happens around an open dumpster, and that's absolutely correct, that will happen. But what's not mentioned is that it's diverting, that dumping, if it's not happening at that dumpster, is happening on back roads somewhere. And you'd much rather having it happening on the dumpster. So open dumpster policies with a high service level associated with them to prevent the problems that they create or mitigate the problems that they create are a smart idea for reducing backroads dumping. And then prioritize the policing of dumping. There are some renewed efforts because the trash problem has gotten to be so extreme. Legislators are taking a new look at changing the fees that are charged for dumping, as well as prioritizing it in terms of prosecution and so on. So another thing we can do is improve campsite cleaning. So the service that we need for this, one of the services, is a city-sponsored weekly waste disposal to an ad hoc location. So this is a regular route-based waste disposal, but the locations aren't fixed. And so, what's happening here is somebody sets up a little encampment somewhere. The city shows up, a week or two after that happens, drops a can and starts servicing that can. That's essentially what we need, is something where regular waste disposal happens even at non-addressed locations. Train city crews to clean campsites in place. So the other issue that happens with campsites cleaning is that because of problems with interactions, liability, sometimes crews would take things that are other people's possessions and so on. There was enough problems that city crews generally are told not to go anywhere near a campsite. Oakland, I think their rule is 50 feet. They won't pick up any trash within 50 feet of a campsite. I'm not sure what Berkeley's rules are. But there's broadly a discouragement of cleaning campsites because of these issues. We've resolved this by talking to people. So when we clean an area with campsites, we go by beforehand, we introduce ourselves, we tell people we're coming, we learn people's names, we give them gloves and bags. We do a lot of things to build relationships. And when we come to cleanup day, we ask, right? And so that has allowed us to largely to clean some very complex and difficult areas with few issues. Resume regular clearing of campsites when trash fields develop. This is controversial because when you clear a campsite, of course, you are causing a lot of problems for somebody when you do that. The issue is that some people will not let you clean, and some people are hoarding, and there's just no way to get in and do what needs to be done in terms of reducing the amount of trash without actually removing the campsites. So when trash fields develop, I feel that campsites need to be cleared. I think that also helps set boundaries that are important to making this work for everybody. So those are some of the policy related things. These are some things that we're doing. So I have, looking at as much trash as I do, it's both a discouraging thing, but there's also some optimism in it. I'm convinced that the trash problem is a solvable problem. There isn't so much out there that if we made a societal effort, we couldn't fix it. You can catalog all the places in a city that have trash. Relatively, there aren't that many places where one would go to hunt up trash. And it's on a scale that you could make a significant impact on all of that trash through a volunteer effort. However, organizing work parties is definitely a lot of work. So we're working on tools to make that fast and easy. And so I'd like to share with you a little bit of those tools. And to do that, I'm going to switch to a browser and go to our website. So, okay, so this is the main Untrash. Hang on a second. I want to. Is there any way to hide this bar on the side? It's blocking my screen. Okay, it doesn't look like I can.
I believe if you click on the very thinnest option, the line, that will hide as much as it can. Does that work?
To the left of your name.
With it?
Doesn't seem to be anything like that on mine. It's okay, I'll work around it. I just can't get it to go away, so it's blocking part of my screen. Okay, so anyway, this is our website, right now this is organized around the work parties that we do. And so if you come on to this, and this is at online at untrash.it, and if you sign up for this, all of our work parties, you get an announcement of them, you can RSVP and so on. If you scroll down on this, we have the list of projects that we're working on. Right, so we're working on all of these right now: Berkeley Parks, Berkeley Streets, Oakland Streets, Richmond, and so on. Right, so there's a lot here. One of those is the coastal parklands. I'm going to click through on that. So this project here is all of the coastal parklands from Richmond south to Oakland, and so starting out here in the far north at Pinole Shores, in Pinole Point, Wildcat Marsh, etc., all the way through here. And this is the entire coastline. And if we take one of these, the Seabreeze and surrounding area, so these are this is a spot page basically, and so there's a little diagram here that shows you a map of it and where the area is and where things are. There's a description here about the spot. There's a note on the trash. There's a note on the hazards. Oops, there's an error there. These labels are wrong. The text is correct, but the labels are wrong. and so on, and then trash disposal, etc. Also on here, you can adopt a spot. So if I click on adopt a spot here, I can put my name in. Looking forward to helping out. Okay. Whoops, I've already done it. So if you adopt an area, what happens is that when people organize a work party to clean this area, you've got a notice, right? And so the idea is this allows anybody to adopt the area and allows anybody to schedule a work party. And so people ad hoc some time on a Saturday afternoon and say, okay, I want to clean this part of Grizzly, and send out a little notice. And everybody on our email list within a certain distance will get that notice and will have a chance to show up. And the goal of this is to get me out of the loop, and so that we can have lots of people organizing lots of cleanup efforts all over the East Bay. So we run into, as we do these projects, we run into people all the times doing something similar. So there's lots of folks out there who care about this problem and want to help out, but maybe they can't make it to our big parties in Oakland right now, right? Or maybe they want to work on something special. There are how-to guides. So for example, this spot location has homeless encampments. So there's a how-to guide. And so this how-to guide goes into how to engage with homeless people when you're cleaning around their areas, right? How to stay safe, what to do about needles, the legal and social context, etc. So there's just a bunch of information here to help people take on what can be a difficult task. There's a map with directions, and then there's a leaderboard. So Diana has been active in this area, has cleaned 4 bags of trash. And the last time she did was March 14th, and so on, right? And this is sort of early days on this, but we'll make leaderboards and hand out certificates to people. And so the whole idea of this is to really help people get excited about cleaning their areas. The way that we built our organization to 600 members was largely through Nextdoor. And so if you are interested in cleaning this area, you can share this onto Nextdoor. It's just a note. Nextdoor doesn't allow us to post directly, but you can copy a link and it'll take it to Nextdoor. And I can paste this in here. Let's see. This category. Oops, didn't copy the right thing. At any rate, it'll post that spot into Nextdoor and help bring attention to those efforts. So this is Rev A of this. We're just kind of getting it to the point where it's workable. We've sort of done a soft launch of it at this point. And this is really built around all of the spots that we have put in. The next version of this software will allow anybody anywhere to create their own projects and their own spots. And our goal with this is to launch 10,000 untrashed groups, right? We need this everywhere. We need a scalable solution. And the goal of this is to wrap up all of the organizational and information tools that we've learned and make them easily accessible to anyone, anywhere. So that's Untrash the Planet, the nonprofit group. That's what's happening on that side. There's another project, which is, get back into play mode here. That we're working on is Untrash as a Service. So I mentioned earlier how expensive it was for Caltrans to remove trash, $42 a bag per trash for Caltrans, and how expensive it was for park rangers to be cleaning back roads and so on. I realized while we were doing this is that the volunteer efforts are great, but they only take you so far. You need a professional commercial service to do this, because the problem in some cases, you need legal liability, it's down a cliff or something, you need specialized resources. It's not something that can be a strictly volunteer effort. So that's where Untrash as a Service came from. So think of this as Uber for trash, right? So it's a gig economy kind of a thing, app-based, where anyone can sponsor an area and set a budget. And the way this works is you have a map, you draw a little circle on the map of the area that you want to sponsor, and you set a budget. And once you do that, trained, certified, and insured untrashers log into an app, and then they clean the area, right? And they're in the app. It's like Strava or Runkeeper, if you're familiar with those kinds of apps, where it tracks where you go. And so you can watch as somebody wanders around an area cleaning it, so you know the work got done. At the end of which they take a picture of it, and then you know the amount of time, the amount of trash, and then they get paid. And so what this does is that it drives down the cost of this to almost nothing, because you don't have the massive overhead of a Caltrans type operation. And at the same time, you can pay your workers better, which is another reason why Caltrans is expensive. This is that they have a lot of turnover. So that's Untrash as a service. Using the data from our volunteer efforts, how much time we put in and how many bags we pick up, it would cost us about $15 a bag to pick up a bag of trash. If this were $15 an hour service with workers' comp, basic liability, et cetera. So all the sort of a fair wage, and with all the sort of the basics in place, we could still undercut Caltrans dramatically on cost. And so this is sort of the next service on this. And this is a planned idea for this is actually a for-profit service. And I'm looking for investors to make this happen. I have a background in software design and have built many software products. So this is comfortable terrain for me. This is what I do. So that's what I have for you today. So yeah, let's untrash the planet.
Thank you so much, Steve. That sounds like a great thing to do. For those of you who joined us after the introductions, and I didn't realize I didn't introduce myself, I'm Arlene Baxter. I'm the first vice president here of the Hillside Club, and it's been my pleasure and my honor to coordinate this series. So I'm going to be directing questions. If you have questions for Steve, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. I have a few already that have been in the chat, so I'll work through those first. Starting with, you mentioned just a little bit at the end there, Steve, about that you have a background in software, but how was it that you really, besides just having a lot of passion for this, how was it that you really took on the job of untrashing the East Bay and trying to untrash the planet?
You know, so I grew up backpacking. When I was a kid, we would go up to the Sierras, and we would always pick up, you know, litter and trash along the way. So you know, it was something that I was blessed from an early age to be taught to, you know, honor and respect and love nature. So that's a little bit where it comes from personally. What's interesting is when you do this work and you meet the people who are out there doing the littering and so on, you realize it's not that you're dealing with terrible, awful people. You're just dealing with people with a different mindset. So you know, you need to do the work to get in their heads in a positive way. Yeah.
And as you said, if what they see around them is other people littering, then
it's what you do.
That's the norm.
Yeah.
Right? So we are very fortunate that you were very fortunate to have the parents you did, and as you said, in the more elite areas there is less trash, but it's all of our problem. You mentioned a couple of solutions. If you could wave your magic wand, what would be the very first solution that you would try to implement?
Oh gosh, I haven't really thought about that. I tend to think of this as it's a complex issue with a lot of moving parts. So I guess I wouldn't put it down to a single policy solution at all.
Okay.
I mean, there are things that it would depend a little bit on who I'm talking to, right? So, I think that the dumping issue is one of basic economics. So I don't think we will get rid of backroads dumping until we lower dumping fees,
Right.
for example, right? And so, if you have an opportunity to sit down with somebody who might have the power or inclination to do that, and that's, there's big money associated with that. That's not a cheap thing to do. That would have a dramatic impact. Social norms is probably your biggest lever. It's pretty cheap to teach a kid, right? And so in terms of your bang for your buck, early education, modeling, cleanups with your class, that kind of a thing, I think that those efforts are probably your biggest wins.
Someone had put in the chat reminding us about Lady Bird Johnson's big campaigns when some of us were growing up. Keep America Beautiful.
Right.
That was a standard.
Yeah, they're still around.
And, yeah.
Yeah, they're Keep America Beautiful is still around. They were launched in I think 55 or something like that, and they still have a big budget, and they do an annual big cleanup thing. And those kinds of efforts matter, but I think that they matter for the social norms kind of thing more than they do for actually solving the day-to-day problem. I think that the solution to the day-to-day problem has to be persistence. It's got to be every week.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned about reducing the dumping fees as being a really crucial policy that could make a difference. Have you seen any examples of other municipalities or other states?
I haven't followed it that closely, so no. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, all right, fair enough. There was some questions about Caltrans. I think you answered pretty much, but I know when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that Caltrans really doesn't want to give permission or doesn't give permission to be on their land, but you're just doing it anyway.
Right.
Is there some way to lobby with Caltrans or anything that we citizens can try to exert some sort of effort?
Many people have broken their boats on the shores of Caltrans. Caltrans is very hard to work with. So is East Bay Parks. Yeah, what happens with big agencies is they have a problem. And because they have a problem, they say, okay, we'll have a rule to address that problem. And they just get very, very, the power goes up and the agency goes away, and the ability for people to do things goes away. So Caltrans is difficult. Caltrans has believes that they're operating from a safety culture in denying people access to their land. It's not really a safety culture. I mean, that's part of it, but it's more of a CYA culture. Right. It's a bureaucratized culture,
which is so much of our culture, unfortunately.
We solved it by not telling them and then cleaning, and then when they found out, basically bullying our way through it. And now we're on their distribution lists. I mean, they communicate with us about when they're coming out to pick up the trash. So even though we're out there not technically legally, they've accommodated us. They recognize the situation on the ground. And we have tried to do the legal thing. So we've applied for the Adopt a Spot program for that section, and we're denied because Caltrans doesn't allow people to adopt sections with homeless encampments.
Got it.
Because they had a problem.
Right.
Right. So it's kind of like that, where they've worked themselves into knots.
Understood. Well, so you're asking for, instead of asking for permission, you ask for forgiveness. So
yeah, the jurisdictional lockout thing is a really critical one, and it's something that as an organization we have to face pretty directly. that we're not respecters of it. And that's agencies don't like to hear that at all. But you can't solve the problem without the willingness to trespass to pick up trash.
Right. You mentioned some solutions that are already, or some programs that are already in place. For example, the bulky waste pickups that both City of Berkeley and City of Oakland have.
Yeah.
Those are once a year for any resident. Although I confess it's still on their website. I don't know if they were actually doing those pickups during COVID, but most years they do, and it's a good program, and a lot of people forget about it. They don't make it easy either. It's in Berkeley. You have to reserve several weeks in advance. They only pick up on Wednesdays. They want you to put your trash in the median strip. Many of us landscape the median strips, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, nice in theory, maybe not so much in practice. But for those of you listening who haven't taken advantage of those, look into, certainly Oakland and Berkeley each have those programs, and they can help you get rid of a lot of stuff. A question, how to report a trash problem?
That depends very much on whose land it is. So, you know, we keep track of that kinds of stuff. So one way to do it is to go, we have a Facebook group, is to go, and I'll put the link in there, I realize I didn't send you that earlier, is to go into, it's just to note it on our group, and then, you know, we can look at doing a work party or something out there. Broadly, reporting, sorry, I'm doing two things at once here. Trying to get the link in. Okay, so that's the link to the Facebook group I just put in. Broadly, it depends on whose jurisdiction it is, right? So all landowners have a function for dealing with dumping and waste trash pickup. The municipalities broadly are very good at it. And the agencies like Caltrans are broadly quasi-good. They'll come out for some things and they'll ignore other things, right? So, but you know, they have a proper system for reporting and so on. There's a phone number for county roads. There's a different phone number for city roads. You know, so it all depends on the jurisdiction, pretty much.
Right. I presumably it also depends on the nature of the item, whether it's a mattress or a dead animal, or
it's mostly it's usually one point of reporting. So a dead animal is usually, you know, the Berkeley 311 or Oakland 311 type service, and they will come out. They will route it internally to the correct group that deals with that.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So the other thing to note is that on our spot pages, we have a section on waste disposal. So we note, you know, who you would call to, if you have a bags of trash lying there or a dump, who to call, right? So if you can find it within our spot pages, you can do it that way.
Great. And where are you, I think you answered the question that you're getting various organizations to pick up the trash, but generally the trash that you and your groups are gathering, you're simply gathering and then having the municipalities pick them up?
Municipalities, Caltrans, whoever the landowners are. It's sort of a rule for us is not to remove the waste. And that's somewhat because we're not set up to do it, and somewhat because we want to drive the systems that are in place to do that already, right? So, you know, when it doesn't work, I've got numbers at Oakland I can call and so on to get them on track.
Right. You explained to me, but perhaps you can explain to everyone how you've acquired the equipment and the materials that you use, and share with people the vests and the picker grabbers and such.
Yeah, so we're donation based. So the city of Oakland has an incredible Adopt a Spot program, and that's what got us started. They gave us all our initial tranche of equipment, bags and so on, and we use that equipment to clean a lot of Berkeley as well as a lot of Oakland. So the big ups and kudos for City of Oakland, Public Works, and Adopt a Spot program. We also have a GoFundMe, and we take donations, and so that's how we're funded now. When people show up to our work parties, we provide them with everything, so vests and picker tools and bags, and we have a whole system and process We have occasional odd little tools with screens and things. So we invest in trash tech. We had to figure out ways of getting trash off of steep slopes. And you saw some of those pictures earlier. There was people on ropes going down hillsides. All of that is stuff that we've figured out over time. That's where that money is going. And then the other thing that we invest in is the software. So we've spent almost $10,000 on software now to build this Adopt a Spot program.
Well, thank you for doing that, for sure. So a couple probably pretty final questions here. Then there are more macro questions about things that are working. You mentioned the problem, which is really a mandate issue about fossil fuel plastics.
Yes.
Those of you tuned in know in the last 2 Julys, I put together plastic-free July presentations talking about the issue and trying to get people to reduce their use of plastic, the demand for plastic, trying to lobby with manufacturers to have a complete life cycle policies so that more corporations would be responsible. But besides those things, again, is there something that you would recommend or inspire those of people who will listen to this recording of what they can do?
So a couple of things. So plastics are not very recyclable. So there's a bit of my understanding is that currently of the plastics that people recycle, the only thing that's actually recycled are bottles. Everything else goes into the waste stream.
That's right. About 9% of total plastic is truly recycled.
Yeah. So I think we shouldn't put too much weight on plastics recycling until perhaps we get to the age where we're burning it, and then it will actually go away. Right. The thing I think matters more is making the plastic itself bioplastic, so that when it does go into the environment, and it will, it breaks down into things which aren't there permanently. So, but the plastic that matters for is the to-go packet. So like your cereal box that you take home, that's not going to end up on the side of a road. Right. It's a different source for it. So yeah, recognizing the confluence of the use case of people in a car throwing things out the window, and those items, right?
Right. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions. I'm going to stop my video though because I need to go.
Okay.
My laptop. So also questions in the chat about suggestions for, let's see, putting dumping fees and similar regs in place. Has there been resistance to that, or is that just not something that's been a priority?
Well, I'm not that high up the food chain on any of these things. So, the people that I've spoke to have been like city council people and so on. So, where sort of some of these policy things would happen would really be at the state level. I don't know where that will go. I'm just figuring it out as I go along. And events like this, I meet a lot of people, and people come out of the woodwork. So it's a process where you build up that network and you figure out the people to connect with on all. I have thought that sometime down in the future, when we're a 501(c), that having a policy group, that their function was to work and get legislation passed would be a worthwhile thing. But that's not today. Today, our main focus is the software platform.
Absolutely, and it looks like you're making good progress there. Just remind people that there is a GoFundMe link on Steve's website, the untrashtheplanet.it. So I just gonna...
Somebody in the comments asked a question about going back to see if it stays clean. It's a reoccurring problem in these areas.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to talk about that one in particular.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So yeah, it does come back in, but there's some dynamics here which are interesting. The amount of new trash flowing in is usually less than what people think is happening. Usually the bigger problem isn't that there's a huge flows in, it's that the flows out are bad. right? So if you take, like, for example, the university encampment, um, the trash that we removed from there, a lot of it was very old. Um, and so, you know, cleaning that out, makes an appreciable difference for an appreciable amount of time. Now, there's definitely new trash coming into that. We cleaned it up pretty nicely, and now it's starting to go away. But the physical amount of trash is still far below what it was when we started. Um, Other areas like cleaning remote roads, it's fairly like, I mentioned how on Wildcat Road, every pullover had dumping along it.
Mhm.
But that dumping is often 5 years old. And so every pullout is about a dozen pullouts, from San Pablo up to Inspiration Point. It's a quiet, if you drive along it, it looks like a pristine road. It's beautiful. So those dozen places with 5-year-old trash, it means that somebody is coming up in there and dumping 2 or 3 times a year, right? So it's not that it's an everyday occurrence, it's that it never goes away.
Right.
It's not being taken out.
But presumably that's very different than what you're experiencing, say, at Lake Merritt, where you have.
No, it's still kind of a thing. I mean, yes, it's definitely new coming in, but like that gigantic pile that was there, that I showed the video of that, that's months and months and months old. That no one had added to that pile in a long time.
Well, that's actually does give some hope.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's City of Oakland is completely overwhelmed, right? So things are just sitting and sitting and sitting over there, and it gives the appearance that it's happening all the time because it sits for so long,
Right.
right? But really, it's more a story of them not ever being able to get on top of the problem and just sitting for a long time. It makes it seem bigger than it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, all of which really speaks to just how impressive it is that you've taken this on and that you have truly made a difference. So kudos to
Thank
you
you.
and your organization. I want to encourage those of you who have been inspired both by the problem and by the ability to make a difference in the solution to join us. So we've planned with Steve a Hillside Club inspired cleanup group, and that will be April 11th. April 11th at 11. That's a Sunday morning, and there is a link. There should be a link in the chat for a sign up. It'll be about a 3-hour event, and as Steve said, they'll provide the key equipment. And those of you know I'm a realtor and I chair our climate action committee for our Association of Realtors. We're also doing an event, our Earth Day event is going to be another cleanup with Steve on a Saturday afternoon. If by chance you want to do two or you can't make the April 11th one, that will be on Saturday, April 17th at 3:30, and I'm happy to share that information with you. And it will feel good to join those efforts. They are, I would say, friendly to responsible children. You can make it a family event. We're not doing homeless encampments, obviously,
Yeah.
but and
And
anything you want to say about those, Steve?
we encourage kids. Yeah, kids are good. This area, we're going to do the northern part of northwestern corner of Aquatic Park. And we're going to meet at the playground there. So even little kids would be great at this particular event. And we're going to be working along the shoreline there, as well as possibly getting up the railroad tracks and so on, depending on how many people show up and so on. So it'll be a variety of different kinds of cleaning for a variety of different kinds of people.
Super.
Yeah.
And if you all want to think of this as your Earth Day activity, that was our hope, as well as just a community gathering event. This would be outdoors. It will be socially distanced, even though many of us are vaccinated, and more will be by then. But we'll still be wearing masks, I assume. And it'll be a chance to be outdoors in our beautiful East Bay area together. So I really hope a lot of you will sign up. And with that, I'm going to make a couple of announcements about future events, but also just want to thank you so much, Steve Orm, for taking on this problem, for being a passionate advocate and fighter for the environment.
You're so welcome.
Grandmother Earth thanks you.
All right.
Feel free to unmute and give him a thank you and a clap if you'd like.
Yeah, the real clap, as opposed to the.
Yay, thank you. That was wonderful.
Very nice. Thank you.
Very informative.
Thank you. Thank you.
And let me just mention a couple of other events that Jim's going to put in the chat for me. So one of the programs that I had hoped to plan for a future month actually was already kind of, a variation was already in the works. So I want to share it with you and hope that many of you will join me in signing up. This is something that's being done by the, what is the group? They publish the Edibles magazine. This is the topic of women changing the food system. It's April 15th. It is also free through Zoom, and Alice Medrick and one of the Guittard family members, two big names locally in chocolate, as well as a name that was new to me with a stone mill flour factory. So talking about the really making a difference in our food system, led by three movers and shakers in the food industry here in the East Bay. And when I inquired about one of the people participating in a Fireside here, they said, well, you know, they're already involved in a talk. And I was kind of tickled to see that they're describing it as a fireside chat. So I'll take that as, what is the phrase? The best flattery is following in someone's footsteps. There's a
imitation.
Imitation, thank you very much.
Imitation, sincerest form of flattery.
Indeed, indeed. That is the phrase. Thank you all. And then I also want to mention, so 2 years ago, we had Kathy Kramer, who had put together the Bring Back the Natives, the native plant tours for 25 years. Bless her. She is, for the second year now, going to be doing those online as virtual presentations. Those will start April 25th. And they last for 4 Sundays, amazingly enough, from 10 to 3, April 25th, May 2nd, 16th, and 23rd. And then those will be followed on the consecutive Sundays, June 6th and 13th, with a green home tour. That is something I'm involved in. My group is helping to sponsor a presentation on electrification and induction cooktops and the advantages of that. So I hope that there's also a link there. You can sign up. All of those are free events, again, through the wonders of Zoom. So I hope you will sign up for those. And with that, I thank you for being here. This is April. I hope that you will consider every day of April at least to be Earth Day, if not every day in general. Thank you for coming to the Hillside Club this evening.